just irrational for our city to allow a company like Comcast to do that. It's irrational for our own strategic interest as a city to allow those exclusive contracts to happen.
Comcast should not be able to come into Tacoma, where we have a cable system of our own, and cut contracts with builders that do not allow the tenants or owners, if they should be condos, to have a freedom of choice with their internet and their cable systems.
We deserve choice. We have cable. We had click cable.
To enforce these laws and give these residents, they have until the end of this month before they're going to be cut off and forced into a monopoly in the very city that invented municipal internet access. It's up to you, members of the council, to address this wrong and save the day.
There ought to be something that can stop an apartment building who, first of all, never says anything to potential renters that they can do this monopoly. It makes us feel like second-class citizens that we cannot choose our communications people.
All right, Mitchell Shook.
It's something came to my attention this month. I've been 20 years here working on the internet project as the founder of Advanced Stream. I never realized that until the 3rd of this month that when my customers started calling from the vintage apartment buildings, we had about 6 calls within a half hour, all from the same address. My modem's not working, Mitch. What's going on? We were able to trace it down that Comcast had come in and signed an exclusive, well, not necessarily exclusive, that would have been illegal, but they were to effectively negotiate the exclusive bulk sale agreement for the internet and the television in that apartment building. These are senior citizens that are probably the most, I guess, vulnerable people in that segment of our society that really should be cared for and looked after and protected from predatory practices that they're now becoming the victim of. So we were able to stop that on Friday. Comcast promised they would go back and reconnect those people. I was gone over the weekend. When I came back on Monday, they still hadn't been reconnected. It was alarming to me to learn that this is how the law works. Now, Click doesn't play that game. If Comcast comes in and pays a kickback, a door fee they call it, a revenue sharing agreement, then they can exclude our hometown network from serving these people, exclude them from having a choice of providers. So talk about net neutrality, talk about our 12 policy goals, talk about the open access that we want to see for our residents here in Tacoma. This is a chance for you to add a simple sentence, maybe even just a comma, that these units shall always be maintained as open access units where the residents will have a choice of providers and not be forced to endure such kickbacks and schemes to work around the law. The FCC ruled 10 years ago that this was illegal. Exclusive contracts are illegal. Now the lawyers are clever and they figured out ways around those rules. The way they did that was by not signing an agreement with another provider. So the agreement's not exclusive, but they're getting paid off not to sign an agreement with another provider. So these are marketing agreements that don't even allow another ISP to go in and give away donuts or put on door hangers. So if you could amend this tonight, I think it would send a message and then encourage our economic development team to always include that language in these resolutions going forward where we're giving these tax abatements. We can begin to fill the loophole that the FCC has left for us. It's only a start and it's only for new construction. Later tonight, I'll be speaking about other ways that we can address this important issue. But with this resolution before you now, I think it's a simple matter to amend this and make sure that these residents that will move into these apartments have a one-touch construction element to this, enough conduit space to allow 2 providers to pull their wire into these apartments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Mr. Tom McCarthy.
That we have a situation where in other apartment buildings in our city, these exclusive contracts with Comcast and other companies are excluding Tacoma citizens from having a freedom of choice with their internet, including our own city-owned Click network. So there's no good reason why there's no public interest in allowing that to happen. To establish freedom of choice to choose whatever internet provider you like, in whether you're in an apartment building or in a home, that is a public interest question, and it's just irrational for our city to allow a company like Comcast to do that. It's irrational for our own strategic interest as a city to allow those exclusive contracts to happen. And so this would be a great start if you could start with this.
Based on what has already happened in a lot of different apartment buildings, and my mother, who passed away last year, lived for 25 years at the Golden Hemlock Apartments on 26th and Pearl. And they have several hundred apartments in there. And she hated the fact that the whole time she lived there, she could not have Click network. She didn't get any of the privileges that go along with having Tacoma's own network. And it caused her a lot of grief, and she complained to the management. The management was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about that." But of course, there was nothing that they could or would do because there was a contract that Comcast had with the owner of that facility. And it's a big one, and there are a lot of them in Tacoma. Comcast should not be able to come into Tacoma, where we have a cable system of our own, and cut contracts with builders that do not allow the tenants or owners, if they should be condos, to have a freedom of choice with their internet and their cable systems. So it just doesn't seem right, and I'm just asking that you consider.
And it recently just came down this last week. What I'm asking today is for the FCC loophole that is allowing this and not allowing us choice to be closed, as it has been in San Francisco, so that there won't be door fees to allow directly to the landlord, as is currently happening now with Comcast. We were promised in the meetings with Comcast that it would be a seamless transition. However, things have happened where people's lifeline phones were cut off, people with heart monitors were canceled. We really need a law like San Francisco to close that loophole and allow people choice and net neutrality. Thank you.
I'm Georgia Sullivan, and I'm also from the Vintage. I have heard several people speak at not only the Tacoma Public Utilities meeting, but also at this one, and I catch myself being referred to. I am the person who lost her phone and internet when Comcast came in to change over my TV. Last spring, from my bed, I had to call 911 to come and take me out to the hospital. And the weekend, Friday was when Comcast came in and hooked up my TV, and totally unbeknownst to me, disconnected while I had my phone in my hand trying to call my son, disconnected my phone and my internet. Those were my only ways out. I don't walk well, I can't, and I don't have a car, so I was kind of stranded. That is just one example of many people that I've heard about since then that have had things like that happen during this transition over to Comcast, which most of us aren't happy about anyway. 3 years ago, when I was moving, because my youngest child had moved out of the house and it was time for me to move into an apartment, I chose the Vintage because, over moving to Kent, because of Click cable. Kent does not have Click, only Tacoma has Click, and Click is affordable for seniors on a fixed income. Click is good. They're dependable. Comcast is not. I've had Comcast before. So this whole thing was not to my liking. Fortunately, because they disconnected my phone and my internet, I called Mitchell Shook, who has spoken here tonight, and he and his worker people came out and immediately connected me back up to Click and back up to my cable and my internet. Okay, that was long before Comcast was going to get around to it. It put me back in touch with the world. I was very happy about that. So, I do realize that our city attorney explained to us what one of the problems is with this this situation of monopoly. And I know the city doesn't want to be paying property damages to the vintage, but somewhere in our laws and regulations, there ought to be something that can stop an apartment building who, first of all, never says anything to potential renters that they can do this monopoly. It makes us feel like second-class citizens that we cannot choose our communications people. There's a lot of things wrong with this, and I appreciate your consideration of all of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council, Madam Mayor. Mitchell Shook, the founder of Advanced Stream, here tonight on this very important issue. I happen to recognize some of my own customers here at council that have experienced this very issue, and have council members' home needed to be remodeled, and that member was forced into a Comcast-only apartment building. That was one time that we experienced it. We tried and we weren't able to do anything in that at that time. And it kind of slipped away from us until this recent Friday when these individuals began to lose their internet services. So the city attorney makes a good point that these loopholes have been identified and that Comcast has exploited these loopholes, but there's ways to fight back. It's not a taking when you stop a crime that's in progress. Now, this is a crime. Every commissioner at the FCC that ruled on this made it very clear that exclusive contracts were illegal. They all weighed in with their pages of support and why they had voted for making it illegal and why choice and competition is important for these essential services. So how do we do it? We look at the San Francisco ordinance that was passed the year before last. They did a good job with the issues that the city attorney describes. They talk about the electricity that's necessary for running the devices. They talk about reimbursing the property owners for any damages. They talk about not disturbing properties that may have asbestos issues. And they address every issue that could be considered a taking. One by one, every issue of compensating the landlord for just and reasonable compensation is addressed. And the ordinance is that simple. And that's all you need to do to avoid a taking. Address the issues, study the San Francisco ordinance. It's a simple ordinance. And it's supported by the legal authority of the FCC, who they found that they had legal authority, very clearly made that statement when they passed the law. And I will cite the way they referred to it here. They said that we conclude that we have both sufficient policy basis and legal authority to prohibit carriers from entering or enforcing exclusive provisions or contracts to provide telecommunication services into residential apartment buildings. So we're just asking you to enforce laws that are already on the books. For 10 years, they found loopholes and ways around them. Now it's up to communities to find our ways to enforce these laws and give these residents, they have until the end of this month before they're going to be cut off and forced into a monopoly in the very city that invented municipal internet access. It's up to you, members of the council, to address this wrong and save the day. Thank you very much.
The city has the responsibility to protect the consumer and the citizen from cable companies, and there were conditions at that time. Anyway, I would like to encourage the city attorney to find the loopholes, to get the courage to fight this. We deserve choice. We have cable. We had click cable. When I moved to Tacoma from Wisconsin, big billboards, #1 wired city, Tacoma. I take pride in that. And I would hope that you also would at least just consider that we are citizens, we're seniors, we live in low income, but we had click. And that loophole has to be closed somehow. I urge you.
Stick with click. Thank you, thank you, thank you.